Okay, guys, and we're back with another episode of the Seth Solo Side Quest. I'm Seth from the Lonely Stoner podcast, and this is episode 89 of my side quest. Now, in this episode, we're going to be looking at the recent reports around the really poor box office numbers, really poor pay-per-view numbers for Beterbiev v Bivol 2. Now, it's been reported that they only sold 340,000 worldwide pay-per-views, which is a number that is slightly underwhelming for the magnitude of a fight like this, and considering both guys were getting paid quite handsomely, I'd imagine, by Turki, alalsheikh and Riyadh season to main event this, huge boxing card. In terms of boxing cards, this was one of the best we've ever seen in terms of star power and names. It was the last crescendo card, obviously featured names such as Callum Smith, Joshua Buatsi, Hamza Shiraz, Joseph Parker and Martin Piccoli was on this card as well. Shakur Stevenson was on this card. This was a really, really stacked card, right? With a lot of big names that would have been paid a lot of money. Hamza Shiraz, world champion. Shakur Stevenson, a world champion. Bivol getting paid like a world champion. Beterbiev, world champion. Callum Smith, world champion as well in his own right. I believe, actually no, I don't think Callum Smith is a world champion, but Callum Smith and Joshua Buatsi, huge domestic names at light heavyweight. Joseph Parker and Martin Piccoli as well would have got paid a handsome fee. And to only sell 340,000 pay-per-views worldwide does kind of speak to perhaps maybe the state of boxing, but also maybe the state of the pay-per-view business as a whole, where I think if you do the math on it, the 340,000 pay-per-view buyers times 20 quid a pay-per-view, that amount doesn't even cover Beterbiev and Bivol's purses, right? So you're already struggling there. And considering the Riyadh season cards, I don't know how much those tickets sell for. I don't know how big the arenas are. But the whole aim with that, in my opinion, that whole Riyadh season isn't to make money. One of the big revenue streams isn't to be in domestic ticket sales, right? If you're having a pay-per-view in Saudi Arabia, you're aiming to make most of your money back on the pay-per-view. Because you're not going to be seeing loads of money from the gate. I don't know the ins and outs of Saudi Arabian boxing and Saudi Arabian sports events, to be fair. I don't. But that's just what I'm assuming, right? But yeah, really weird because, to be fair, this wasn't a, knockdown, drag-out, brawl, bloody guys getting knocked down, competitive back and forth type of fight. And it definitely was a competitive back and forth type of fight, but not a bloody war at all. The first fight wasn't like that. And I don't think anyone really expected the second fight to go like that because both of these guys are far too high-level boxers to be doing that sort of thing, right? They're not low-level brawlers. They're not your average brawlers. You've got Dmitry Bivol, sporting a beautifully demonstrated and perfectly, beautifully executed traditional Soviet style of boxing with the pendulum steps, the ins and outs, the punch volume. And you've got Beterbiev, who, to be fair, is a bit more of a boxer puncher, a bit more of a brawler because he's trying to apply that pressure, walk you down and knock your head off with every punch. But when you've got that against a guy like Bivol, it's going to be a close fight. It's going to be competitive. Bivol won his rounds. Beterbiev won some of his rounds as well. I remember watching the first fight and thinking that Beterbiev done enough to win this, even though, looking back, that may have been a bit of a controversial thought from myself, if I can speak. Controversial thought from myself thinking that Beterbiev had won that, but that's just how I felt at the time, right? And in the second fight, I think Bivol comfortably sort of won it, and at points was sort of running away with the rounds a bit. But even though I say comfortably won it, in my head I had no doubts that Bivol had won the fight, but Beterbiev didn't put in a bad performance by any means, right? Beterbiev didn't put in a bad performance by any means. He came to fight and implemented his game plan pretty well, but obviously he started to show his age a bit more too. He's no spring chicken, and the volume and pace that a guy like Bivol's going to put on you, and he's going to force you to run him and chase around the wing like he did in the first fight. But Bivol was just even more efficient in this fight, and that's gonna weigh you down, and that's gonna show, right? And I think it did start to show towards the latter end of the fight where Bivol was just able to demonstrate, superior levels of fitness over Bivol. And again, that's not to say Bivol was showing over Beterbiev, and that's not to say that Beterbiev was necessarily out of shape, because I don't think he was. Because even when Bivol was outworking him, Beterbiev was still there in the fight. But I say all of that to say, it probably does speak more to the sense of the pay-per-view business in boxing, right? We saw the UFC is the only company that really can pull it off, super successfully, consistently as well. To be fair, boxing can do it as well. Boxing has done it for years and years and years. But obviously we've seen WWE stray from that completely now. WWE is no longer a pay-per-view model business at all. And one may wonder, with Dana White and TKO getting into boxing, maybe that's more the route they want to go down, because the UFC have sort of tried to go down that route with UFC Fight Pass, which is great, and I've got UFC Fight Pass. And if you're a fight fan, I would recommend it, but UFC aren't paying us nothing. But if they was, then I would. They've tried to go down this route, and I imagine, no doubt, they'll want to go down this route even more so now, where you could have the TKO fights streamed directly to UFC Fight Pass, or they launched their own streaming service. They've got DAZN, to be fair. DAZN has been making waves in boxing, but even DAZN, they mess about sometimes, where you'll be paying for your DAZN membership and then you have to pay for an event as well, which is ridiculous. But to be fair, we did think this was going to be the case when DAZN came onto the scene however many years ago, 9 years ago now. And I don't know how well pickup has been. I'm under the impression that DAZN is still losing money, even though now they've got Matchroom and Queensberry on there, which is huge in terms of them sort of distributing boxing, obviously, having the two biggest promoters in the sport at the moment. Not counting Turki alalsheikh, even though he's a shadow promoter in terms of, or a co-promoter, because he's just paying these promoters loads of money to put these fights on. He's de facto the promoter of boxing at the moment. But yeah, it's an interesting spot, because it does kind of, maybe it does prove the old head boxing sort of school of thinking, where, well, for these old school promoters, where you put on a fight that would be regarded as a super fight and it doesn't do great numbers, and the promoter ends up losing money, where you could have, if you're Beterbiev's promoter, right, and you're looking at this purely as a commercial pursuit, which is what boxing is for these promoters and these managers and everyone apart from these fighters, right? Why would I put Beterbiev against Bivol, risk Beterbiev losing everything just to lose money? Just for the event to lose money? If I want the event to lose money, I may as well give Beterbiev a layup. I may as well give him an easy fight. I know then we start talking about governing bodies and belts and all this, so I know there's other factors as well, but, you know, it does kind of prove my point in a bit, in a roundabout way. You know, maybe I'm waffling. But yeah, Beterbiev v Bivol, wow. Beterbiev v Bivol 2, there we go, is somewhat regarded as a box office flop, which is interesting. I didn't think that's what I'd be saying, but it's regarded as a bit of a box office flop. I guess to the casual viewer, the first fight was not the most exciting, right? Even though I enjoyed the fight and was engaged throughout the whole way, me and Evan, when we were scoring it, but we're not casuals, I guess. But yeah, I'll be curious to know how this affects boxing, though, because promoters are not going to keep wanting to put on these super fights and risking their superstars just to lose money on these events, right? I mean, Turki alalsheikh is funding the bill for now, but we'll see how long the gravy train lasts. We will see. But yeah, another episode of the Seth Side Quest in the bag, episode 89, and I'm out. Peace.